Hello and welcome to The Good, The Bad and The Worst, a podcast where we watch movie trilogies and decide which movie is getting kicked out of the pool room. I'm your host Griner, and joining me today...
I'm Luke Morgan, and this podcast is going straight to the pool room.
My name's Conan, and I am an ideas man.
Sure are. Alright, so we are doing a trilogy that I made up with my own head. I'm calling it the Working Dog Trilogy. It's 3 movies by a production company called Working Dog Studios. It's The Castle, The Dish, and Any Questions for Ben. 3 Australian movies, so I was kind of keen on that, and I kind of like Working Dog Productions. I like... they've got All Aussie Adventures, classic Russell Coight, Utopia, which might be quietly one of my favourite shows ever made. And then, I don't know if you guys are into these, comedian panel shows, but thank God you're here, and have you been paying attention? Was Working Dog on any of your radars at all before I brought it up?
Not from, I'd never heard this term or this group, but the Australian sort of entertainment scene is so small and incestuous, right? I knew most of these people. I knew who Rob Sitch was. And it is funny watching this, just seeing some of the actors. And did you guys ever watch something called the Late Show, the Australian Late Show back in the 90s? No. It was just a classic comedy sketch show, but it had I think it had Rob Sitch, it had Mick Malloy, Tony Martin, and a handful of these Australian comedians who they're not all the same group, but they cross over. And so it was just funny seeing some of them. You can definitely see that sort of Australian comedian DNA working through it. So I didn't know who they were, but I like a bunch of the people involved.
Luke?
Yeah, so similar thing that I hadn't heard that term, Working Dog Productions, and associated these films together. Obviously, I feel like everyone, especially our generation, knew of The Castle or watched The Castle when they were a kid, and I myself had heard a lot about The Dish, and had seen posters of it at school. It was in one of the rooms. There was always just a poster of The Dish, and I was like, oh man, that is what a great movie that must be. I should check it out someday. But yeah, and obviously the third one, never heard of it in my life. And I feel like we've really just blown out the rules for trilogies now with this, but I'm sure I'll make do. I'll make do. I have a few that I can think of, but I've famously or infamously been against Australian films. I remember when I started dating my wife, and she wanted to watch all these Aussie films, and I was like, I hate their accents. I was like, I don't like watching this stuff. It's just comes across like bad acting. But I feel like over the years I've found appreciation for stuff, and especially watching some of these, it made me nostalgic, especially for the 90s and childhood. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I think we've brought up the dislike of Australian movies here before. We've come across it with Mad Max and the Baz Luhrmann trilogy that I made you guys do. We've had a few dips into Australian movies, but I think this is the first, truly Australian trilogy. I'm gonna call it that anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I absolutely adored Russell Coight growing up. So I knew that, but I never knew that was associated with Working Dog Productions.
Yeah.
So
yeah, these guys are kind of the last. In my mind, watching this, I was these are kind of the last group of, I think, almost good Australian comedians and stuff. I'm similar to you. I don't really like the Australian scene, not because I'm contrarian, but because Australia doesn't put effort into it, which is a big problem. We don't fund the arts, we don't do anything like that. We are really lazy for that, and anyone who gets a job, anyone who's got talent usually works overseas. So the Australian scene itself stays filled with the people who are arguably or questionably not as good as they can or should be. And as a result, what is made reflects that, etc. I don't want to paint it all with a broad brush, but I guess I have. But these guys, this comedy troupe, I think, sort of that had a lot of these guys are called the D generation, and they are the group that, in my mind, is kind of the last really funny Australian comedians. The kind that people refer to as they look back and they think of the old classic Aussie comedy groups, whereas now we have a little bit more of a, I don't know, Russell Coit's an example of that. Is kind of very different to what Australian comedy is now. Australian comedy now is a lot more, I don't know, socially conscious, a lot more. I don't follow it, but those panel shows you talked about, Grana, what's the I don't know.
Have you been paying attention?
Have you been paying attention? Yeah, and there's another one that is there's the one with Mick Malloy and one of the guys, the front bar or something.
Yep.
And it's basically talking about like footy.
Yep.
And they're a little bit different, but yeah, those shows like Australian comedy is very different now. It's I don't know, just the sensibilities have changed a lot, and there is a divide I think between this group and these products versus what it is now, and I think that's partially why I don't enjoy Australian comedy much now because it's kind of ended with it. And even the quality here slips in these movies, and you see their comedic chops and timing.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah, yes, we will.
All right, well, let's kick into it. Let's start with the stats.
Stats.
All right, The Castle, released in 1997, had a budget of $750,000, made $11 million at the box office. The Dish, released in the year 2000, could not find budget numbers for this movie, no matter how hard I tried, but apparently the box office takings were $16.5 million. And then Any Questions for Ben, released in 2012, had a budget of $11 million and made $1.5 million at the box office. Might be the hardest flop we've had on this show.
That's brutal.
The critical reception. I had to do the forbidden thing and go to Rotten Tomatoes because I could not find a score for all of these movies on any other service. But 87 for The Castle, 96 for The Dish, and 56 for Any Questions for Ben. That totally tracks with my opinion of these movies, more or less, anyway.
See, I feel like we may actually have a chance of bumping up those numbers just from us three paying to watch Any Questions for Ben. Someone noticed that somewhere. They were like, "Hey, man,
Rob's just getting paid. He's getting paid.
3 rentals for Any Questions for Ben.
Somebody
What a
Googled
week!"
This movie, my Google alert's going off the charts this week. What happened? Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it, but it was really hard to find any information about that movie and like even just reviews of it at the time and stuff. Like just. Didn't make any kind of impact. And not that surprising, really. Right? Like an Australian movie not making an impact is not that unusual, I don't think. But if you want to look at it as the 3 movies that this, pretty, I don't know, I want to call it big, but like this, this big part of Australian movie, like Australian production. They're the only 3 movies, and that movie's definitely stands out as a flop amongst them.
It's interesting, looking at it as like the other 2 are pretty clear sort of genre films. Like the first, The Castle is a comedy. The Dish is like a period piece / dramedy, whatever. True story. There's probably a name for that, that sort of thing. And then this is Any Questions for Ben is the most sort of non-genre film. Like it's a character dramedy. It's the kind of thing you used to see, you like hundreds of every year in the 90s, 2000s. This was all like. These are a dime a dozen. There's plenty of brilliant ones. Like some of the best movies are these films that are just a quiet drama or about
I feel like they depend on like a charismatic lead and cast, and
there's a variety
holds their movies up.
There's a variety of factors that make those work, and it's just interesting seeing how Australia does not know how to do these, and that's why this is I don't know if this is the last big one, but this is one of those ones that I'm like, I can't think of any after this. I think Australia just doesn't know how to do these for some reason.
We killed them. We killed the genre. Which is
we kill the Australian production of them. It's just interesting. Like this is a good case study of like why we shouldn't make those maybe, because when we do, it just comes out a bit milk toast at best. But then when we do genre stuff, we're pretty good. Like we make great horror. We make great horror. We make great comedy. We make great car explosion movies. Let's keep doing that.
Stick to that. All right, let's kick it off with The Castle. A working class family from Melbourne, Australia, fights City Hall after being told they must vacate their beloved family home to allow for infrastructural expansion. I really love this movie. Like, I don't know if I realised it as much after rewatching it this time, but like my mum was a big fan of this movie. She's an immigrant, and for some reason the pure Australianness of this movie really appealed to her, and somehow that's rubbed off on me. But I really, really like this movie, and I had a really good time watching it again.
Yes. Now I was on Letterboxd the other day, and I saw Luke's score of this movie, and it was a pitiful, lowly 3 stars. Luke, defend yourself. What the hell is that?
That's a good score. That's a good score.
You should get deported for that.
6 out of 10.
Did you not see that?
6 out of 10.
Did you not see that? That came right after I did like Terrifier, all at half a star. So I was just like, no, I don't know what to rate this as a film. I love this film. Like I genuinely do. I hadn't watched it since I was a kid. Um, and this film gives me such nostalgia for my childhood. I don't know if it's just like I don't know if like every Australian sees like these characters as family members that they're like, oh, that's that person in my family, that's that person in my family, that's my dad. Like, did every Aussie dad wear the same clothes? Like, that's I was just like, oh my god, that is what my dad wears to this day. What is going
Yeah.
on? This is so weird to look back and just it made me nostalgic for a lot of things. Like, just even the house itself, like the rooms and stuff. I was like, man, I grew up in rooms like this, and I said this to my wife. I was like, if you were to see a house like this now, like and you're looking around in the markets and looking, and you see a house like this, you'd be like, oh man, this house is old and dingy,
Yeah.
But back then there was something to it. There was this charm to this coziness house, and
Yeah.
yeah, I missed it.
They used to build them like a rabbit warren, right? Like there's all these little bespoke rooms, all like open plan living, right? Is the modern, but no, this is this little house. There's a pool room. There's all these little pokey rooms. You're right. I think this is a really accurate representation of like working class Australia in a lot of ways because I relate to it in the same way you do, Luke. Like I can identify family members, I can identify neighbours, I can identify the family that I married into in these people. Like it just drips of it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to say, I laughed so much when he was like, "Who ordered the medium rare steak?" and just holds up this like
This is black.
burnt steak, and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's all my family barbecues growing up."
Yep.
And it's like, it's so funny.
Very accurate, yeah. It's funny, yeah, this movie is such a part of our cultural DNA. And like I feel like I realized this watch I'd never actually seen it the whole way through, but I feel like I'd seen it a million times because it's partially because it's always on TV, so I've always saw parts, you'd always flick in and watch 20 minutes. It's really rewatchable, so you'd always wait for certain bits or whatever.
Yep.
And it was just so quotable as well that naturally you kind of knew what happened and where it went because, there's no big twist. You don't go into this expecting or wondering if he'll really save his house. It's like, of course he will. And so I guess there was never a reason to finish it, but I felt like I'd seen it and like I knew so much about this movie, but I'd never finished it. And that's kind of a testament to its power beyond, like, because it's such a simple film. It's just really, like it's, I don't know, nothing, there's no flash to it. Much like the Kerrigans, it is just scrappy and grounded and working class, and they're just making it. But it's so honest and pure. It is like, and charming. It's just impossible to not like and love and let it sort of seep into your bones. I know. I was struck watching this how much I love this movie. Like this is what people refer to when like Australian movies can be good, and when people like this is an idealized version of true Australian patriotism in the best possible way, right? Like patriotism's got a really dirty color to it now, post everything that's happened. Whereas this is at a time where you look at this and you're like, it makes you proud to be Australian because it's just it's the David and Goliath story. It is the aloofness, the charming simplicity
the vibe of it.
The vibe of it. And like I say, just the crappy house that's so charmingly great though, and you're like, even though like he's got all these unfinished rooms, and you're like, yes, but I just love that. It just makes you feel so warm. It's like
the whole back of the house is covered in tarps. It's just perfect.
It's my family's house so much.
I was very struck by like the first thing is like, oh, these guys are idiots, but then you just love them for it. Like, they're not poking fun at people of this class. It's very much like an earnest look at them, and you feel the love of that family there too. Like, there's so many quotes. He's like, oh, if dad's the backbone of this family, mum's all the other bones too. And just, I don't know, like it's almost so sweet that it avoids being saccharine. Like it avoids just pushing it too far. Right. It just feels really earnest. And, I don't know, something it's just so heartwarming to watch, I found.
It's totally a product that it couldn't be made today, not because it's like politically incorrect or anything, because I think it actually does a good job of being quite like, it doesn't offend anyone, doesn't really do anything. It depicts a group that like a community that was very white, but that's not really, I guess you could argue that's a problem if you're a bit of an idiot, but I think that's totally fine. But what I mean by saying it can't be made today is like this, we're in a time where society is so divided and so sort of cynical, right? And like expecting everything to be, everyone's trying to get one up over you, and there's just a mistrust to it all. Whereas this is so, like I say, it's so sweet but not saccharine. It's not snide. There's no sort of like, it's never winking at you, being like, hey, this is what we pretend to be, or hey, Australians are idiots. It's like, no, it's just like, this is true goodness, like good natured people, warts and all.
There's
And
like zero edge to this movie, like not even the hint of one.
And
yeah.
that's the thing. Like when it does stuff that you think would be taking a shot at people like this, but then when you relate to it, it's like, well, it takes away that thing because it's like, oh my god, no, this is very true. Like him going to the jail to see his brother and just their conversation. Not that I've ever had to go to the jail to see my brother, but like that conversation where he's just sitting there and he's like, yeah, and how's mum? Yeah, good. How's dad? Yeah, good. It's like we've all got, I don't know, siblings, and it's like sometimes conversations are very much like that, especially when there's like an age difference there. And
Yeah.
but then afterwards you're like, man, it's good to talk to him. It's like it's good to catch up. So yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of the quotes of it, like, just, I don't know, things like the things that we don't even know, like, a pool room. I never knew what a pool room was. No idea, sort of what we never had one. No idea what it was, but just you kind of just get this, I don't know, this vibe and like the vibe and the energy of it, of just this weird, like, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but like, things like telling he's dreaming, right? Like that just tapped into something that was so Australian, like this in the psyche, just this idea of what Australians do, and like the pool room is this where we put our treasured things, but we're so kind of grounded that we don't use them, and that's ironic, right? There's kind of a farcical nature to that, but it's like, yeah, of course you want to just put the best things in a place you can look at them, and yeah, tell him he's dreaming. It's like, why do you need jousting sticks? I don't know, but it'd be a bargain if you're going to put less than that.
Man, the guy combing through classifieds like has aged so well in the day of Facebook Marketplace. Like the number of times my wife brings me a post on Facebook's Marketplace of something that we do not need, but she thinks it's a good deal. It's just like, I don't know. I feel like that has aged perfectly.
It really has.
It's timeless. And like that's the thing, my family growing up and like even now, I feel like the amount of times I hear, "Oh, tell him he's dreaming," like still to this day. And just I don't know, they nailed it so much, and it really, unlike any other film I can recall, just gave me such a strong sense of nostalgia. Like we had a pool room, and like it was exactly like that. And my dad wore the exact same type of sweater with a polo shirt underneath, and only thing was missing off my dad was the mustache. But other than that, it was like everything was identical, and it just gave me such a sense of nostalgia where I was like, man, I miss being a kid without responsibilities, Those are the good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely knew the family that had too many dogs in the backyard and had to move 6 cars to get to the car that they actually wanted to drive that was registered. I don't know, just relate to it so much. And part of me is like, man, I don't know if I'd like to live next door to them. Like, I don't know if I want 16 cars in the driveway and halfway up the street and dogs barking all night. But then this movie just makes them seem so appealing somehow. Like they're just salt of the earth.
Yeah.
Yes, there's something. Yeah, there's something totally to it. That happens everywhere, but in Australia, it feels like there's something really about that, like the bogan culture, right? It's like, oh, you kind of hate it because it's like they're rough and they're gross and they're idiots. But sometimes, like the best people you'll ever meet are just these. I don't know. It's just there's this honesty to it of like someone might seem like a real hick or an idiot, but they'll be super lovely and super friendly. And it's like, oh yeah, you're being who you are, and you can't help but like that. And that's that's totally with the Kerrigans. Yeah, it's like the house would be a mess, and like sometimes the aloof or obliviousness of like reality could get tiresome, but you just kind of want to hang out with them, even though like Dale's such an idiot and like all he has to talk about is the
he's dug a hole.
Yeah, he's dug a hole. But it's like that is the kind of
what's on the TV everywhere. Yeah,
yeah. He's like, what movies did they watch? That's like, but you just want to be at that table because you would just feel welcome. It wouldn't matter about what you're going to talk about or if they're from the same, run of life. It's like, this is just good people, good nature, and like there's something really cool about that.
And that's the thing. There's just simple things that, like, the way he compliments his wife's cooking on everything. It's just like it's these stuff that's really good values. Like he really does. You buy that this relationship, like he thinks the world of her. And no matter what, he's always like, oh, and what's this?
Yeah.
It's just
That's what you've done with it.
chicken.
Yeah. Sponge cake.
Like
Yeah.
talking her up, glazing her, and that's the thing, like, yeah, Dale. Oh, that whole scene cracks me up as Eric Bennett's trying to like talk about the thing, and just it'll go like sentences deep before he then chimes in again. He's just like, "And what order did they go on?" It's just like, yeah, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Cracked me up. Like, I found the movie genuinely funny, and I was worried after all these years it wouldn't hold up. But I feel like I laugh more now at it than what I did when I was younger. Because it's just, yeah, I don't know. There's something to it.
Yeah. I was struck kind of by the I don't know, the economic sense of it. Like, just the whole narrative, like their house is getting taken over by greedy developers. And it's like the idea of this shabby little house, and what they've got there is his castle. It's everything to him. But things like the 'cause my memory of this was, I don't know, he has like a holiday house in Bonnie Doon, right?
Yep.
And like thinking of it, I'm like, oh, are they actually? Is this going to be one of those movies where they're actually super wealthy, but because it was 20 years old, they're like, we're low middle class, and it's trying to, and then like in this day and age, it's trying to convince me that this guy with 2 houses and 6 cars is poor. But watching it there is like the reason why they got a holiday house is because he bought this slab of land, bought like a build yourself house, and they got it in like it's in a runoff area basically, and they go there in the off season.
Yep.
It's like this would be kind of worthless thing. It's like nobody would go there or live there except these people who are like, we can make this, like we can make something out of this. I just
Going to Bonnie Doon.
I just that whole idea of like we drive all the way to this really gross, like crappy lake in the middle of winter to a pretty shitty fibro house, but it's what you do with it. It's not about what it is.
Yeah,
and it's just that is such a great insight and life lesson, right, for a movie to do. And we've had that a lot, and it can be really, I don't know, passe and corny or whatever. But it's timeless for a reason. Like, yeah, it's not about having a nice house, and it's not about being rich, and it's like they made a life and a castle with what is all pretty shitty stuff. Like, that's really cool. It's a good reminder, it's good. It's easy to lose yourself in all the stress of life, but like this movie really is kind of like a reality check in a lot of ways of like,
it's very relevant even to this day, that it's like, I had a moment watching it where I'm like, man, like, look at just the stuff he appreciates. Maybe I don't need a new Fandango machine, that like comes out and I convince myself I need to buy. Maybe I should just be taking the kids to the
just spend every weekend washing your boat, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. That house of Bonnie Doon is up on Airbnb, by the way. If you wanna go there for a holiday now, full of memorabilia from the castle.
How much does that go for?
It didn't look terribly cheap, although not like super expensive either. Yeah, I think it's been done up from what it looked like. So
that would be pretty funny.
Yeah, we should have done that for the podcast. We should have gone rented it out.
Gone to Bonnie Doon.
Yeah.
All right. Before we dig another hole, should we move on to the next movie?
Yeah.
I just want to shout out real quick. Charles Bud Tingwell appearing in this. I don't know. I don't know much about him, but there was a little skit in the Late Show that he always was in, and like they always shouted out his name, to like Charles Bud Tingwell. And so seeing him appear, I was like, "Holy shit, it's Charles!" And he's really good in it. That
he is,
and that as a kind of that narrative turn, right? Like the whole climax hinges on just randomly having a conversation with the best lawyer in town.
Yeah,
you could easily write that off as convenient plot writing, or whatever. But it really works in this because there's something about like Daryl. You spend so much time being like Daryl Kerrigan is the kind of guy who would just be friends with everyone, talk to everyone, just a lovely bloke who'd chat to a guy outside of a courtroom.
Yeah.
And so it's never like, oh, how convenient he runs into the best lawyer. It's like, no, this is totally believable.
He's one of the only guys a lawyer would do something for free.
Exactly.
Like, he's like, hey, he's a nice dude and didn't hit me up for help. He was just telling me.
No, that's right.
So, yeah. So I like the turn at the end where they're just like fishing buddies now. Like they just can't.
Yes.
You can't keep them away.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, moving on.
All right, The Dish, a remote Australian community populated by quirky characters, plays a key role in the first Apollo moon landing. Have you guys ever been to Parks? Ever been to The Dish?
No,
No.
my wife lived there. I found out,
Yeah, right.
and I don't know why. All these years, when she said she lived in Parks, I just assumed like it
She
was
lived in a
in,
park.
in Parks, like outside. No. I thought it was just a suburb in Sydney. Like. And then just seeing this, it made me look up. I was like, oh, it's 6 hours from here. I was like, I should go see The Dish. I'd like to go see The Dish. So
It's actually
I plan on going and seeing The Dish.
It's actually worth going to. Like, I've travelled through there a lot over the years. We used to live down that way. It's on the way to Melbourne. We've stopped at The Dish a few times. It's worth going to, I think, in my opinion.
Check it out.
And Parks has or is it Forbes?
Forbes
has
and
a Elvis impersonation event every year too. So go check that out.
No,
That's pretty fun.
check it out.
But I don't know. I have a soft spot for that part of Australia. I quite enjoy this movie.
Did you have a
Do I
soft
think
spot
it's
for this movie? Like, did you?
I
watch
remember
it?
enjoying it when I watched it the first time. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's as strong as The Castle. It doesn't have the comedic chops of The Castle, but I think as a kind of a period piece, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd never seen this movie, but it was one of those like quintessential Australian films that I had missed. I feel like everyone at school watched this, but for some reason I didn't.
You were sick that day or something.
I must have been like I don't know. For some reason, that's how I remember and understand it. But yeah, it was. I was surprised how good it was. I think I always ignored it because I was like, Australian movie about The Dish. What's this going to do? But it's I don't know. I actually really like sort of space movies about this period, the moon launch and like the space race. Like it reminded me a lot of a movie called October Sky, which is one of my favorites, and just kind of the like I guess the two things that struck me, like the inspiration of such an event, and then just the sort of like the unity that forms around a monoculture. So like the way everybody in this town was watching the moon landing, like the whole world was watching the moon landing, and this whole town comes together to basically just be like, this is something great we can do. And there's no like there's no, again, like with The Castle, there's no sort of cynical like guy trying to undermine it or like bad person trying to come in and be like, let's sabotage this so we can get the glory. So it's like, no, this is something that happened, and we all sort of answered the call, and it was for an achievement for the human race rather than for an individual group or country or anything. Like that's, I don't know, it's very admirable. It's really nice.
As someone who like, I don't know, I really like a lot of movies that are based on this time and around the moon landing and stuff like that. And to have this like point of view that was quite, I was blind to this. I didn't know this was a thing. I'd never seen this movie, and again, I felt like everyone in high school did, so I obviously missed that as well. But I had no idea that there was this pivotal role that this rural town in Australia played for the moon landing, and it was quite
neither.
cool to discover that by watching this movie and to be like almost proud of it in a weird way. Where I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like I didn't know. Like I was like, why didn't Neil Armstrong shout out Parks? Like he should have. He really should have shouted us out. But and like that's the thing. It genuinely made me want to go and see The Dish. After watching it, I like looked it up and I was like, oh my god, awesome! I can go see it. I'm so excited by this. And
Yeah.
it was something like I really enjoyed this movie, and similar to what you said, like there wasn't some villain there that's trying to sabotage anything. It's a bunch of people who can have arguments, but then they realize, oh, I argued with you because I was misunderstood about this, and they hash it over and talk it over, and there's no conflict then, and it's like, the biggest drama thing is the wind. It's just nature in Australia, and that gives it its tension and everything like that. But I really like the chemistry in this. Even having Patrick Warburton, I'm a big fan of him.
That's great.
And having him there, as soon as I saw his name pop up in the credits, I was like, "Oh, this is so exciting!" Sam Neill's great. I like this film a lot more. Not a lot more, but like I like this film a lot because it has that acting strength behind it. Like Sam Neill is a great actor. and I can watch it and pretend it's Pierce Brosnan because he sounds exactly like Pierce Brosnan, and he's there with his little pipe and everything, and it's great.
Did make me want to smoke a pipe, actually. I must admit.
Yeah, it's classic. But yeah, I really like this cast of characters and their
Yeah.
interactions with each other.
Yeah, there's something about that theme of like, these rural Australians kind of having that inferiority complex almost, and you come over here, you think we're just a bunch of hicks out in the middle of nowhere, we can do good things, but nobody actually thinks that. They've kind of brought that on themselves, and I really relate to that. I think as someone who's grown up in rural Australia and would like to do cool things, but also it kind of feels like I'm a hick from country Australia, and what do I know? Yeah, and I really like the way they kind of resolve that conflict too between Kronk and the guy. I don't know what his name is, but they just talk it out, and they're like adults, and they have they handle it like adults, and I think that's kind of refreshing. I think the little romance subplot between the two characters is, I don't know anyone's name in this movie, was kind of fun too. She's bringing the sandwiches, and
Glenn and someone.
He died too, by the way, which was really sad to look that up.
Did
he was very young.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sea Change. I was like, where do I know him from so much? Yeah, Sea Change, and he died quite young.
Oh, there you
go. I really like the security guard.
He's pretty funny.
Yeah, Rudy's great.
I love him thinking he's talking to Neil Armstrong, and he's just like, "Thanks, Neil." He's just like, "Oh, it's great. It's great."
He's just got an incredible voice as well. Like,
he does.
Hey, why didn't he go on to do big things like voice like that? Damn.
He could have been Fast and Furious. Why was it Vin Diesel?
Yeah. You're right, Greta. Like, this one isn't as much of a comedy as The Castle. So it kind of lacks that. And like the low stakes of it is kind of a detractor in a way. Like, there's not a whole lot of drama in this. A lot of it is just vibing out with 1960s Australia and the space race, which is fine. Like, it's a great way to spend 2 hours. But I mean, I left it kind of wanting a little bit more. But like, it starts with an old Sam Neill visiting, and he's tearing up, and it's like he's reflecting on what he did. And I'm like, okay, that's reminiscent of like, I was reminded of Saving Private Ryan, where you see the old one come up, seeing his dead comrades. And I'm like, okay, you're going to get into like some deep drama here. I don't know how, and it doesn't, right? And it's like he's getting teary over the time they broadcast the moon landing. Oh, yeah, it's great. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there, of like maybe, but all that being said, like there is still some really good comedy in this that keeps it going. Like pretty much everything that Tom Long as Glenn says, like it's like, we don't know where he's a kid. It's on the way to the moon. Just how sort of dumb he is, even though he's a genius, is really funny.
Yeah.
Everything with Rudy. And like kind of the mayor's the mayor's daughter, where she's like just kind of a roaring, like, what we would call now as woke, quote unquote. But she's just like accusing everyone of being a fascist and like
patriarchy.
The patriarchy. Oh, that's just really funny. I just kind of how everyone's kind of just ignores her because it's the 60s.
Yeah.
I don't know, that was really fun.
Yep.
But now it would be the others getting ignored.
That's right. Just calm down, Luke, all right? Calm down.
Sorry. I won't get into it.
It's an interesting time. Like, I don't know, I kind of envy being part of that time where everybody sat down and watched this one event on TV. Like, I think I've had, like, my dad has talked about it. And I think that's cool, but I'm like, man, like, we never got anything like that, right? Maybe 9/11.
9/11 is the only thing we had.
And maybe that, like, that's had a big effect on us. No, we need another 9/11. No, we don't need another 9/11. Don't say that. But like the trauma of that experience compared to the victory of a moon landing,
very different.
Yeah, maybe there's something to be investigated there.
Yeah,
100%. I said the same thing to my wife after while watching the moon landing scene, where I was like, man, like, to see these like kids, like all these like young kids just in awe of this life event that's happening, where I honestly feel like, if something was like similar to happen now, where it's like, oh, we're flying to Mars to have a person land on Mars and walk around like a human, I just feel like kids would just be like, Skibbity Sigma, you know, and like they'd watch it. They'd probably watch it live on Fortnite, to be honest. Fortnite would probably be streaming it on like a
Streaming
concert
it.
thing.
Like,
I
could you
feel like,
imagine like the egos that would be involved in that today too? Though, like that would be an Elon Musk venture, right? Like,
Elon
can you
Musk,
imagine
yeah.
how that would turn out, or
Well,
it'd be a
live
Jeff
launch on
Bezos venture
X.
or whatever? Like,
The, the problem is you'd have Elon Musk doing it. You know, you'd have a group, or you'd have NASA doing it, and you'd have like Elon Musk's brigade being like, "This is fake. They're not actually doing this." And you'd have like these two divided parties being like, when like there would actively be somewhat like groups saying, "This isn't happening. We're not doing this," and it's just like it would just be a shit show. Yeah, that was the biggest thing I took away from
the
this.
amount
Like,
of conspiracy people would be there.
easily, yeah, was really just like what a kind of, you know, I don't want to be all like, oh, times were better back in the day, but like just the beauty of like events like that everybody engaged with, and like how everyone participated in that.
yeah,
I'm like, that's
Yeah,
pretty special. Yeah.
like the unity of that time feels just like so far away from today, right? Like,
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like when I asked my wife when is the last time that happened, she again said like 9/11 was the last thing where everyone sort of asks like, oh, where were you, or you know, what were you watching, and you know, it's either Cheese TV or something like that in the morning before school. And I can't see how we have a world where that happens again.
no.
And it was
No, like I remember my memory of 9/11 being like, oh, can they put something else on? I'm kind of sick of this being on TV all day, right? Like, obviously, I didn't understand the gravity of it. You know, I was
like,
too young to understand how huge of an event this was.
Yeah, I just remember, 100%. I just remember being like, oh, it's still there. Like, it's still seeing the same shots over and over again. Like, it's gone. Get over it.
It's where were
Put
you
Dragon
on
Ball
9/11,
Z
Conan?
back on.
I mean, yeah, 9/11's kind of. I'm too young to really remember. Like we saw it, but it was like we turned on Cheese TV. It was like
Yeah,
exploding buildings, lame. Turn it off. Like I really just didn't watch it because I didn't know what it was.
yeah,
But that was definitely the last big event that, like, you know, we had the sort of the fallout of that. I guess the only other event would be what the great crypto crash and the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight.
Tyson fight.
That I think united all of us really.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you about the stakes of this movie. Like, even the wind thing, like they build it up and they build it up. And the true story apparently is that the main guy didn't even watch the moon landing because he was too busy trying to control the dish and keep it steady in the wind. But they even cut that amount of, you know, conflict out of here, that amount of drama. It's almost just, oh, the moon landing happened, so we don't need to worry about the wind anymore. Like,
yeah, I read that same thing and I was like, yeah, I had the same thought. I was like, that would have been a great thing about it, right? Like this character,
that he misses it because
because he has to sacrifice it so the whole world can. That's a great dramatic idea. Like this guy who's upset or would love to see it, he can't because he has to make sure it happens for everyone else. Like sacrifice. I was saying that I was like, why would you cut that out? That is perfect narrative stuff there.
Right.
Yeah,
that's great.
So strange that they were like, nah, we just need them all sort of hanging out and being happy. But yeah.
Oh, it's a happy movie.
Yes, yeah, it's just a good time.
Yeah.
Right. Should we get
Speak
rid of
the opposite?
Should we get rid of the good times? Go to the bad times.
Yeah.
Any questions for Ben? For Ben, life couldn't be better. Well-paid job, friends, parties, girls, and nothing to tie him down. But when he is invited back to his high school for a speaking engagement, he starts to reassess the direction his life is headed in.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Ben. Why are you such a dickhead?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I can see why no one had questions for this boring fucker, because holy crap. Oh, man. This movie...
I cannot tell you how much I hated this movie. This might be the movie I hated the most out of all the movies we've ever done.
Oh, man. This movie is soulless, lifeless, pointless, and has no redeeming qualities. It's just there. And it's just montages of this douchebag. So many montages. This douchebag just staring out a window, complaining about his life. And
when he's riding a helicopter to a mountain in New Zealand, like this movie aged worse than either of the others by such a huge margin. It's not even funny.
Yeah. And there's
Talk
like
about something that feels so un-Australian though. Like
Mm.
this doesn't feel like an Australian movie. This doesn't feel like an Australian character. It's like, who does this speak to? Who's watching this? Like, oh man, my boy, yeah.
which is funny because, like you say, it spends so much time being like strategically laying out all of Melbourne, showing you
Yes.
like here is the race, here are the alley apartments, here's the cafes they go to, here is like
Here's the river, yeah.
like it's painstakingly as like this is because this is like I said we said at the top, this is a long tradition of drama films about like in American movies you'd be like this is a film set in New York and you'd so go to Central Park and you'd go to I don't know other places in New York, but you do New York shit, you know, and then everyone could be like, oh wow, I feel like I've hung out in New York. This movie is designed to be like I've hung out in Melbourne, which I guess a lot of people in the world might see as a admirable thing. For us, it's probably a bit different because we're like it's just an Australian city, wackadoo. But yeah, it is funny. Like it spends so much time trying to be like, look at the life of an Australian playboy, and it's like this is the most. Yeah, it's soulless. It's empty. Like there's nothing Australian in this outside of the window dressing. It's bizarre to me that they did this, that they made this movie. Like I don't know what Rob Sitch was doing. I don't know what any of the writers were doing. Like I don't know if there's a story behind the production, but it is like it's the strangest miss I've seen in a long time. Like there's nothing funny really in this movie except his friend who's like just really dumb.
Really dumb, yeah.
And like he's got a few funny one-liners, but just the biggest problem.
Not have the charisma to carry this movie.
No.
This is a big problem. This guy, so what's his
Kano,
name?
Josh Lawson.
Now that is the one thing I'll defend him in. Like he is good as Kano.
Yeah, I didn't mind him as Kano. You're right.
But he's an Australian actor who, it's like we said, Australian actors it's a small group, and for some reason he keeps getting roles. This guy keeps getting roles, and I'm like, he is not a good actor. And Josh, I'm sorry for listening, but
which he might be.
I have liked him in things like his run on the original Thank God You're Here is pretty good. Like he's really good at that improv stuff on that show, I will say. I know you guys aren't into that show, that's fine. I have enjoyed him in that stuff. And I liked him as Kano. He does not have the charisma to carry this movie as like a playboy guy who you're supposed to kind of care about this emotional journey that he's going on, this self-discovery, but he cannot carry it. And even Rachel Taylor doesn't really do it for me here either. Like I think she's pretty soulless and she doesn't have the charisma to be that that manic pixie dream girl that he's going after kind of thing.
No, that's the thing. Yeah, it's like Australians playing at this genre that we don't understand. Like, and I don't know if it's just we don't understand or we don't want to or what, but yeah, like. You're right, he is completely miscast. She is not. I don't know. I don't find her interesting at all. She's in Jessica Jones, and I think she's really, really bad in that.
Transformers.
Oh, she's in Transformers as well. Yeah, like, and I don't know. I don't get why we. Well, I don't know if they was the only people they could afford or what, but yeah, I don't see them being good at all. Some of the supporting cast are good. The guy who plays his friends.
Both of his friends are pretty good, I think.
Yeah, like the guy who plays his roommate who gets married, he played the serial killer in Snowtown, and he's amazing in that. Like, he's a good actor.
But he was a serial killer in this. made it interesting.
Felicity Ward is Michael Scott on The Office, the Australian version, which apparently is terrible.
So I've heard. But
she's really jumped up in her life.
I like her in this. I think she's fine.
She's alright in this.
Yeah, Josh Lawson, like he really reeks of. The thing that bugs me, he played Paul Hogan in this 2017 version of like Paul Hogan's life, and I was like, he is fucking nothing as like Paul Hogan. Like, how dare you? But it reeked of that. Like, we had one actor who looked kind of like him and who could act, and so we got him for that. Like, I think that's how
good enough for Logan Paul. He can't be Paul Logan, I tell you.
I'm just going to ignore that and keep going, but. It really this is what I thought of this. I'm like, I honestly think there was probably no one else who would like take the small payday and do this, because this guy is just not handsome enough. He is not funny enough, engaging enough, interesting enough, charming enough, anything. And it's just such a misstep. You can't have this kind of movie without like, this is the kind of movie that you would have like George Clooney front or something.
Man, just think if this was like 2 years earlier, they could have had Chris Hemsworth before Thor, Like, good example,
Even early Chris Hemsworth, I don't know if he could have carried this movie.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, maybe Chris Hemsworth today, maybe. Probably would be better than this. You're right, but I kind of wish there was a bit more of a story to this movie, like how it ended up being this way. Because I think like the direction and editing of this movie is just terrible too. Like,
the editing,
Fade to black, fade to blacks,
fade to black, and montage, and that's the two tools they have. Like, they don't know how to end a scene. They don't know how to make a scene cut into another one. Every scene ends with a montage, and it makes this movie feel so strange.
Or like mid-conversation, they're just like, they'll say, and it's just ending the scene. Like, what have I missed? What's going on?
Like, was the acting so bad that they just couldn't stand to be there any longer and had to move on? Like, this conversation's really boring. Turn the music up. You're right. Like, I don't know. I'd love to know the story behind this movie. I think
it's got every single Australian song like ever made.
Yes,
like just every 10 minutes is another one. Oh yeah, I know this song. This is okay.
What was on the hottest 100 this year? We need all of them. Like,
give us the top 20, please.
Yeah,
I love them.
They got a discount for using all of them or something.
It became laughable where every time a new song started up, I was like, oh, it's another one, another montage. I feel like we just finished one, but okay.
Yeah. The cardinal sin for this, to me, though, like I really wanted to like this movie because I like this kind of movie. I like these quiet character dramedies of like, just growth, a person's growth of like a soulless shell learns to be human. Like that is timeless. All the great directors have made movies like this, and often they're really some of their best. And so I really wanted to come away from this being like, oh yeah, this was just an unseen gem. But like outside of the bad performances and some of all the questionable choices, like there is no character or growth. Like, there's no reason why anybody would or should like this guy. Like, he's got his mentor, who's this uber wealthy like guy. And he's just always like, Ben, let me help you. Let me give you money and advice. You're my son. I was like, why? What has this guy done? What has this guy done to earn your credit? And everyone's just like, can we hang out with Ben? I'm like, why? He's not funny. He's not good conversationalist, or if he is
just throwing themselves at him, and it's like he has no charisma. He's void.
And like people and he's kind of an asshole to so many people, and they're still just like, because he's got a lot. It's just a weird, like, you need him to be relatable and human, and he's not. And so then the story is like, there's just no growth. He has like 3 conversations with friends where he's like, I just kind of feel a bit empty, and they're like, oh yeah, and that's it. There's never like a breakdown. There's never an emotional moment. All it is he's like, he doesn't get asked questions about his life. So then he starts pining over this girl and he gets jealous. And it's like, this isn't growth. This is like, what's going on? There's nothing to be like, why is he
shallow? Thing.
Yeah. Like there is no pathos at all. It's so weird of like, when he's like, I'm going to marry this girl. I'm like, why? Like, what have you done? Nothing clicks here.
They've like, even the 2 main characters who you're supposed to kind of feel this chemistry for, like they barely spend any time together in this movie. Like he's with other women more, he's with his flatmates more, he's talking about her more than he is actually with her. And, I don't know. This movie is such a miss to me. Like I just could not believe how much I disliked this movie.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. This is just such a
absolute drop off from the last 2.
It is, and like there's a big gap, right? 12 years between them.
Yeah,
but like this is an example of the kind of movie that I think people like us would watch and be like, oh, Australian cinema is dead. Yeah. And like we can be harsh. I personally can be very critical to Australian movies. I get that, and that's something that I have to work through, and I have been trying in therapy for many years. But like you see a movie like this where it's like we're trying to be, it's almost like this feels like we're being, hey, take it seriously, please. We can also make character dramas like all the best. And it's like, no, you fucking can't. And I don't know if it's... Yeah, and I think like you see a sort of movie like this, I'm like, yeah, you know what, you kind of deserve... We deserve to be defunded. The arts deserve to be defunded if this is what they make. Because we need to either put more money in and learn how to fucking make them, or stop trying to be like... I don't know, just...
money out of it. Like...
Well, yeah,
they had too much of a budget, obviously. They shouldn't have been able to pay for this much music.
It's true. What is it, $12 million? I don't know how the hell what they use that on.
What a bomb. $1 million at the box office. Yeah. Like, wow.
I have heard like it was sponsored by the city of Melbourne or something, so that's why they had to have all these shots over Melbourne. Like,
makes total sense.
I'm sure there's a lot of that sort of stuff going on, but regardless, the product we got at the end of the day was trash.
Yes. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I think it's like the Australian sensibility is just so different to this. We are not that interested in like, I don't know. We're not that interested in like the narratives of our lives as other cultures are, I think. And like what I mean by that is, American cinema's got a long history of like here is someone from coming from nothing and making something or whatever. Australians, I don't think we really give that much of a shit, and that's why we're always just like we make good genre stuff because we don't want to be like here's the life of a young bogan Australian doing cool stuff. It's like no, we just want to watch people get killed, and like we're good at that. We are good at these things. Like we just need to stick to that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I think you're right. I think a lot of like something Australia gets criticised a bit for is like we won't stick up for ourselves. We're kind of just happy with the status quo.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks directly to what you're saying of like we're not that interested in the story of our lives. It's just we're the lucky country. We just want things to continue as they are. And
yeah,
you could tell a story about this like this. It's kind of interesting about an immigrant or something coming to Australia and seeing this different perspective and having an appreciation for Australia, whereas we take it for granted. Like this, but yeah, this movie.
No, especially when this movie is just about a white dude. Like. I'm not really one for race politics, but this movie's incredibly white. And in 2012, that was kind of missing the mark. It's only aged worse, but like there is no one of any sort of other color or group. There's not even like I think his mentor is played by, who's he played by? I don't know.
He's like a Greek Australian, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. So like an older, sort of the older class of immigrant where they're not really immigrants anymore. But like, yeah, there's no one else at all. And it's like, what a weird choice to be this like, let's hang out with the uber wealthy white guys and their quote unquote problems.
Like just seeing the place he lives in and seeing him, get on a helicopter to go snowboarding down the top of a mountain. Like, I don't have any sympathy for this guy, like at all. I'm sorry. He can afford therapy.
Yes, it just does nothing to be like, why is this empty either? Like, the story is trying to be like, it's trying to tell us, oh, this is all hollow because he has no personal relationships, but it never does that.
No,
it's just like, look how fun this is. They're snowboarding and they're riding helicopters. It's like, okay, cool. So what's empty about this? He's like, oh, he said it was empty. I'm like, the fuck is that? You can't do that.
And it's not like he never loses anything, right? Like at the end of the day, he stays in a job. Ooh, what a sacrifice he's made.
Yes,
he doesn't move apartment. Wow, Ben, what a sacrifice.
Like there's a hint of it with his mum. There's kind of a hint that his mum's like kind of sick of his shit. But even though they don't explore that at all, like that would have been really valuable. They're just like there's like one or two little quips where it's like, okay, so she's getting impatient with his frivolousness, but that's it. There's never anything from there. There's never any development, or I guess his friend at one point is like, "You're an idiot," but then the next scene she's like, "We're okay." Okay, that was simple. Yeah.
All right. Should we rate them, rank them?
Yes.
Sure.
For me, it's the castle, the dish, and then any questions for Ben.
Yeah, Rob said he peaked. He peaked at the beginning, and he's only gotten a little bit worse.
Well, a lot worse at the end, but
I do like the dish a lot. I do really enjoy the dish, but yeah, you can't go past nostalgia with the castle. So yeah, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, a lot of stuff. Then
1,
3.
2, rectum cancer, and
Human Centipede trilogy, and then
yeah.
Any questions for Ben?
Yeah. What a miss. All right. Thanks for joining us for the good, the bad, and the worst. Next fortnight is our 2024 year in review. So we will go back and look at the movies we watched that we didn't necessarily cover on this podcast. Movies and TV, I think we usually go with, and we'll give you some recommendations that you can watch over the holiday season. And then other than that, we'll catch
also
you in
things
the
to
new year.
avoid. Also,
yeah, we like to be negative as well. So
yeah, we do.
Yep.
And I'll be talking about any questions for Ben.
Oh boy, have I got some things I didn't like watching this year. Yep. All right. Thanks for joining us for the good, the bad, and the worst. Please rate us on Spotify. It helps us out greatly. This podcast is brought to you by the books by Conan Clark, The God Grotesque, and what have I forgot his name? The Taste of Iron. I'm a terrible person. Check them out on Amazon. They're great books. Give them a read. There'll be a trilogy soon.
Yeah, it's happening. It's coming.
It's happening. Sounds good.
12 years down the line.
Hopefully it's better than any questions for Ben, though. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.